live.
Let me get the link.
It's really narrow, and the current is just fast through there. Big old state park.
All right. Well, we're ready to start, I think. And this is Grace Baptist Church, the Adult One Bible Study. And I hope that you're able to tune in today online. And some people are here in the class as well. Today we're going to be in John chapter 18. And John chapter 18, we're going to be, the title is I Find No Fault. And it's session number 10 if you're following along in your lesson thing today. Oh, it's working good. And page 91 through 99. And we're in John chapter 18. We'll be looking at these three areas. The transfer, verses 28 to 32. The trial, 33 through 38a. And the trade, 38b through 40. We did the first half of 18 last week. So don't worry, we're not skipping that. We already did that part. And the main point today is that Jesus was without guilt and sinless in every way. So we'll be looking at these areas in our study today. Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer, and then we'll jump right into it, because we are a few minutes late. I apologize to you online. We're about 10 minutes later than we should have been. But we're started now, so here we go. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the ability we have to study your word, Lord, in this country that so far has not said we couldn't. Some countries don't have that luxury, Lord. Thank you that we are able to in this country. Just be with us as we go through these different areas of John chapter 18, where Jesus is truly the innocent lamb, Lord, that is now being tried and is going to be murdered and going to be dying for our sins, Lord. Lord, I just pray that you'd help us as we go through these points that we look at today, and be with those that are not here, keep those safe that are on their way here, and watch over those online as well. In your Son's precious name, amen. Amen. All right. So, what are some TV shows or movies that you know that are based, and you could even extend this to maybe book series or a favorite book, that are based on legal proceedings? Legal proceedings.
Perry Mason.
Perry Mason!
Oh, wow,
Boy,
that's a great one.
You got the best one right off the bat.
Man.
Perry Mason's one of my favorites. And by the way, there's all kinds of genres of this kind of stuff. There's mystery, there's the legal things, there's romance, there's comedy, right? Perry Mason had almost all the elements right there. If you ever watched a bunch of Perry Mason, they had a lot of comedy, they had the mystery sometimes, but they had the legal proceedings. So it's kind of you get like a buffet just in watching one show. Is there any other shows you can think of? Maybe more modern? I like Perry Mason. I watch it all the time, but there's more modern ones. Columbo is.
Oh, that's a good
He's more
one.
of a detective type.
Oh.
You don't see the trial part. I'm talking about the legal proceedings.
Right. Oh.
But I love Columbo's one of my favorites. Okay, my very favorite. And I hate to say no. Sherlock Holmes, of course. But that's again the same kind of thing. The genre is detective. So we're trying to find ones in the legal realm. And
Law and Order.
Law and Order.
Yeah.
Very good, very good. Because you saw not only the detective part, but you also saw right afterwards. You'd see them come to trial and you see the resolution. I like Law and Order.
Oh, there's a lot.
Yeah, kind of the same thing with is it Special Victims Unit?
Uh-huh.
I watched
Right.
the repeat.
That's also
one.
Law and Order.
Yeah.
Special Victims Unit.
Yeah,
I think it
no,
was.
isn't
Oh,
it?
CSI.
CSI, Special Victims Unit.
Yeah. Well-
And even CSI or NCIS, all
Uh-huh.
of those are
Right.
law-abiding
Mhm.
type. Yeah.
Now, I never read To Kill a Mockingbird, but I'm told that it's basically centered about a legal proceeding of some sort. Also, 12 Angry Men. I've heard of that one too.
That's a good
Yeah.
one. That's a good one.
Now, how many of you like Andy Griffith? Some of the young people are watching this. Andy who?
Yeah.
Andy Griffith did. Andy Griffith did the Mayberry
Yes,
series.
with Opie.
Opie, but he also did another one later on in
Yes,
life.
he
He
did.
played a doctor.
Matlock. No,
Matlock.
you're thinking of
No.
Diagnosis Murder, and that's Dick Van Dyke. I thought the same thing. But he did Matlock, and Matlock, he was a
Lawyer.
and he would
Oh,
defend
yes.
people, you know. And so and also there's JAG, there's a military
Oh, I
thing,
love
JAG,
Jag.
right? And Runaway Jury was a movie, I guess, and something called Just Mercy. I don't know.
Even the one with Tom Cruise where, what's his name says, you can't handle the
The
truth.
truth. Oh, that's a
That's-
good one.
Oh, that was a military trial.
Yes,
Yes.
that was a military
yes.
trial.
A few good men.
A few good men.
Yeah,
That was it.
good. Anyway, so we all know those things, right? But ask the question, what factors intrigue you the most when you watch a legal drama or you're reading a book about a legal proceeding? What maybe intrigues you the most about it? We're just talking about getting our interest going here.
Just the details of the crime and how
Yes.
it unfolded and how they were caught, the whole thing.
Yeah, and maybe how the evidence is used,
Right.
in different various things, and how clues are used by the people who try to defend, and that those are trying to, the other side of the coin, not defend, but prosecute. There's a pen right there. If you drop the pen, it's right there in the ground.
That's mine.
I know, I figured.
My oldest daughter, when she was hired by the county, she was a clerk. And the clerks rotate different departments within the Superior Court.
Right.
And the months that she had to do the legal stuff that was not pleasant, she absolutely just hated.
Oh, there's some really
just-
bad stuff.
But then she would love family court because somebody would get,
Oh, I forgot about those. Judge Judy.
Judge Judy. Oh
Yes,
yes.
and Wagner. Remember the old
Wagner.
what
Judge
was his court?
Wagner. Yes.
People's Court.
Yes.
Court. Yeah. Oh, those are good ones. Yes.
Yes. Those. But anyway, so she loved certain parts, but she hated the other parts. So she jumped across the street, and now she's with the juvenile side things. So.
Well, it can be pretty grim too. The worst of the worst goes through those courts. I was selected to be interviewed or whatever to be on a grand jury at 2 different times. I had to go all the way up to Seattle for this, and both times one time I was selected, but I was the backup. So if somebody falls out of the original thing, then they substitute. I was like one of the last as a backup, and they never called me, which is probably good because I heard it was some sort of a drug deal thing where they dismembered people and stuff like this, and I don't want that in my mind the rest of my life.
Yes.
But anyway, since people enjoy trying to figure out just who did it, or maybe you pull for the underdog to win in that trial or whatever, right? And so today in our study, we're going to examine the legal drama of Jesus. And he underwent a Jewish and Roman trials with no defense, no one to defend for him, and no jury. That's not much of a trial. I think that's a kangaroo court, we call it, right?
Yep.
So anyway, as we examine the scriptures, we want to reflect on how Jesus proved that he was sinless and guiltless in every way. Let me see here. John 18 moves into a section where John is focusing now more on what Jesus went through, his suffering, right? And just as a backdrop, before this, remember they were in the upper room, right? And they did the Lord's Supper. And before the Lord's Supper, he gave Judas the morsel, and he went out to betray him. Then they did the Lord's Supper, and they also, I think, did they do the feet washing? No, they did the feet washing before all that, actually. So he washed Judas's feet. Think about that. I think that's true. And it was after that, I think. I might be wrong, but I think that's true. It's hard because you have the 4 different gospel accounts, and they're not in all perfect chronological sequence.
Yeah.
So you have to look at them and compare and see. But anyway, and then he left the upper room. He went across that big valley, Kidron Valley, and up all the way up, part way up the mountain to this garden on the Mount of Olives called Gethsemane. And there he had that prayer, intercessory prayer for us and for himself. He was praying for himself as well. And that's where he was also betrayed, right? So and then they took him away. And that's where we were last week. They took him away, right? So now we're talking about the various trials. And one of the things in the handout today is also up here on the board. Those of you at home on the digital thing, whatever it's called. I don't want to say Zoom, it's not right. It is Zoom. Yeah, it is Zoom, isn't it? Not Skype. You were on Zoom? Yeah, that's right. You probably can't see it, but the poster's right over here. It's called The Trials of Jesus. By the way, I send this out via email, and so if you want to be on that list, let me or Pastor Matthew know, and we'll put you on the list so you can get them. But anyway, it's showing the various parts of Jesus' trials. And it's quite interesting. And we're not going to focus on all of these aspects, just a few of them. Some Gospels talk about Herod, some don't. So you wonder, why are we talking about Herod? Because he went to Herod because Pilate was trying to take it, please, Herod. I don't want to deal with this. And Herod said, interesting. No, it's back to you.
Yeah.
Herod was the king.
Let's send it back to a lower court.
Herod was the king. Herod was the king, and that seems like that would be where you'd go, right? But no, because he was king only because Rome allows him to be king. And he served the emperor. And the real power...
Caesar, right?
It was one of the emperors. One of the emperors. It was Emperor Tiberius that appointed Pilate.
Pilate, yes.
Pilate was the real power. He had the authority to call the centurion out and go up and take over something and do whatever. So he was the one that was feared the most. So he had the civil power. So that's why we're kind of focusing in on here today. Now I don't know why I'm getting calls. Okay, might be something important. I'm going to have to check it because Matthew is not here, and he might be saying, "You're all messed up today."
It looked good to me.
No, he's not,
Oh.
so that's fine.
Okay.
I am getting off this now. I apologize to everybody who's now going to turn my thing to off. No more ringer. Don't just hate that when people...
Yeah, it's funny where,
Take
you know,
a
you
call.
try to put all the four gospels together to get
Yes.
the big picture.
Get the big picture, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and it's confusing. I wish somebody would just say, I'm
Yeah.
sure they have. I'm sure they put it all in chronological
Yes.
order.
And I was going to get one of those, but this is pretty close.
Okay,
This is
good.
pretty close. And you have a copy in your handouts. It's handout number 2. And we see on this handout, we're going to just look at this briefly here, but the first place they went to was Annas. Annas' home.
At night,
A-N-N-A-S.
right? Middle
Yes,
of the night.
Yes. And Annas was the high priest. But he was basically, he was not, the power behind the throne was Caiaphas. Caiaphas was Annas' father-in-law. So, yes, Annas was the high priest, but he was high priest because the father-in-law said, "You're going to be high priest for a while." So Caiaphas was the real power. And anyway, and after Annas, Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin is this Jewish council, had a lot of power on Jewish religious matters. Did they have power in the civil area? You'd think no, but they sometimes did. But it was all dependent upon if it suited them. And I'll get to that later. Then they went to the full Sanhedrin, not just the select, but the full Sanhedrin. That was at Caiaphas' house as well. Then they went to Pilate. Pilate, like I said, is the real power here, the Roman Praetorium, they call it, which is basically is Pilate's compound. It sounds really impressive, the Praetorium. But it was where Pilate lived, and where he did a lot of his business that he had to do as governor. Okay, and then he said, "Well, you know, this is a Jewish matter. I don't really see anything going on here.
So he said,
Herod, you take care of it." So he went to Herod's palace, and that sounds so impressive, palace. But he was kind of, like I said, a figurehead. He had power to do things, and people didn't like Herod, but he also did good things too. He helped build the temple, for instance, rebuild the temple. Anyway. Then Herod said, "Well, this is all very interesting, but you know what? Go back to Pilate." And that was in Luke chapter 23, if you want to read more about that. We're not going to touch much of that. And then Pilate, of course, is the second trial, the one that really mattered. And this is where we're going to be focusing on primarily today, is that number 6, Pilate, the second trial. So, who'd like to do some reading for me today? I have some verses. Let me see. Would you like one? Okay.
Sure.
Go to you. There we go.
Thank you.
Let's see. You like to read, so I'll give you that one there. How about that one? Oh, you get this one here. Alrighty, and I've got one over here. Hopefully I'll remember to read. Well, I'm sure I will, because it's the first one.
Ooh, yeah.
Well, technically I have pre-one.
Free one.
Oh, show off.
No, that's all right. Anyway, so going on here, the various trials of Jesus is very interesting. So later on, look those up and read more about them in the other Gospels. I think you'll find some enlightenment there. So after Jesus was arrested in the garden, he was taken to the home of the former high priest. Oh, right. Maybe I got it reversed then. I thought he went to... I might have that reversed. Caiaphas might be the son, and Annas was his father-in-law. Anyway, whatever the case, it's not too important at this moment. Okay, Annas.
Annas was the former high priest.
Annas was. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So, and there he was falsely accused and treated with cruelty. Jesus was then sent to the high priest, Caiaphas, and then the Sanhedrin for further examination. And I do have a couple of verses I'm going to read there, and this is in John 18, because we read this, I think, this was previous. Yeah, it's not part of one we're reading today. In John 18, 12 through 14, so the Roman cohort and the commander of the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus, remember that, bound him and led him to Annas first. For he was the father-in-law, I had it reversed. He was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. So Caiaphas was the high priest. But he served because basically his father-in-law, Annas, I had it reversed, I apologize. Now Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews, basically he had prophesied this, by the way, that it was expedient for one man to die on behalf of the people. Now why do you think he would have said that? This is before Jesus was arrested. Was there turmoil because of Jesus being in the town? Yes, there was. Was there plots going on by the Jews to kill Jesus?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. Way before, even when he entered Jerusalem, remember? They were plotting to kill him. They were plotting. Keep that in your mind. They had already had a template of how they were going to do this. Okay? And keep their hands clean. Keep their skirts clean.
And they did it at night.
Well,
so
that's when
part
evil works.
of it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, in John 18, verse 24, says, so Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. So, anyway, so that gives us a little more context of what was happening at that point there. And then we have Luke 22, verses 66 to 71. I think, Steve, you had number 1?
I do.
Could you read that for me?
When it was day, the council of elders of the people assembled, both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council chamber, saying, if you are the Christ, tell us. But he said to them, if I tell you, you will not believe, and if I ask a question, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God. And they all said, are you the Son of God then? And he said to them, yes, I am. Then they said, what further need do we have of testimony? For we have heard it ourselves from his own mouth.
Okay, so he's before the Sanhedrin here. This is the governing Jewish body that decides Jewish things. Okay? And so they have all kinds of laws. You know that, right?
Right.
All kinds of laws. They have laws about laws about laws. It's amazing. And so they're trying to get him on something they feel, well, this will be it. We can get him for sure. So he asks them a question, right? And he says, if I tell you, you're not going to believe, right? And says, if I ask a question, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man. Now, Son of Man is something used as a euphemism for the Messiah. Because if you said it outright, that would be not a good thing. So he uses the term Son of Man, which is actually from the Old Testament, which was used to apply to Messiah. Anyway, so we'll be seated at the right hand of the power of God. Now, what does that mean? The right hand of somebody. When you hear that term.
We hear it today, right-hand man.
Yeah, right-hand man.
He's the go-to.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
He's the...
So somebody is your right-hand man. Is somebody... So then they asked for clarification. He says, are you the Son of God then? And he said to them, yes, I am. Now, the interesting use that term, I am again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then they said, what further do we need of testimony? For we have heard it ourselves from his own mouth. What did they hear? What was that one?
Blasphemy.
Blasphemy. So in their minds, their very Jewish minds, legalistic minds, they had it. He couldn't escape. He said blasphemy. And blasphemy could not be forgiven. Blasphemy penalty was death. Now, could the Jews, this is a really interesting question here. Could the Jews carry out the death sentence on Jesus for blasphemy?
Well, they used to be able to, but that was taken away from when Rome took over, right? They weren't allowed to
Supposedly.
kill.
Yes.
But they killed Stephen, though.
Ah, you did know that. Yes, very good. I applaud
They
you.
allowed certain things.
So basically, when it was convenient for the Jews, they let the Romans do their killing. It's important to think about this because what was Jesus to the Jewish people in general? Was he popular?
Extremely.
Did they like him? Most of the Jews. Most of the Jews liked him. Okay.
The everyday Jews.
There you go. The ones that saw him doing the healings, the ones that were fed by him, the ones that heard his teachings and stuff, and listened with an open heart. Not the Jews who sat there. What did he say? He said that. I got it down. I'm going to report it now. We'll get him for that. Not those. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the normal, regular Jew who had been prepared for him coming by John the Baptist, by the way. a lot of these people were familiar with John the Baptist. A lot of them had perhaps been baptized by John the Baptist as preparatory to the coming Messiah. So that was that field that had been plowed and ready for the seed to be planted. Remember, John was very important that way. So they were in fear of this group, okay? So keep that in mind as we look at some of these other things, that they did put people to death. Remember the woman caught in adultery? What were they going to do?
Kill him.
They picked up rocks. They were ready to kill him. When Jesus one time was near a cliff, they were going to shove him off the cliff and kill him.
No.
Yeah.
I was surprised at that. I thought I read the Bible and I go, I didn't even,
Yeah. But it wasn't his time, was it?
no,
No. Matter of fact, I think that God caused their eyes
to have a
to
shield.
be shielded, and he was just able to walk through it.
Well,
And of course, you brought the prime one, which I do have a reference in my. Maybe you looked at my notes. In Acts, Stephen, they didn't seem to have any compulsion. Oh wait, can't do this. Wait, let's get the Romans to do this because we can't do it. No, they killed him.
But didn't they take him outside the city?
It didn't make a difference. It's still Rome controlled all that
Oh.
area.
And Paul was involved in that, right?
Paul was holding the coats, saying, "Yeah, go get him. Yeah, go get him. I'll hold your coats. Go get him." So Paul was in hearty agreement. It said. Anyway.
This one looked good in my closet.
So is there a reason for them going through the procedures here with getting him tried in the Roman court? It was, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, because then they had the stamp of Rome on it, and it would be done, and would their hands be dirty?
no.
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 They'd be clean, they think, they clean, which is not true, but we'll see that in a moment here. So Jesus was found guilty of blasphemy, a crime that carried a death penalty in Israel. That brings us to the start of today's study. Since the Jews claimed they needed the Romans to carry out a death sentence, they shipped Jesus off to the Roman Emperor Pilate. And so let's look at the first, well, not first verse, the second verse here. The first main or focal verse is in John chapter 18, verses 28 through 32. And so as we read these first 5 verses, I want you to listen for words and phrases that maybe stick out to you. That say, hey, that's interesting, or that's something that I was wondering about, or that makes a lot of sense, or whatever. So let's look at these first ones. Who's got number 1?
I don't know.
I mean, no, excuse me, number 2.
Number two. I have number 2.
I messed up. Number 2.
Then they led Jesus from
Caiaphas.
Caiaphas into the praetorium.
Praetorium. Yes.
Oh,
Cai-
big word.
Caiaphas, remember, was the high priest.
Oh yes, yes.
The
yes,
Praetorium.
yes, yes.
The Praetorium is where
Is it like a
the governor's mansion
okay?
and compound. Okay.
And it was early, and they themselves did not enter into the praetorium, so that they would not be defiled. Defiled, yes, but might eat the Passover. They're all about it, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusations do you bring against this man?" And they answered to him, "If this man were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him to you." So Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews said to him, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death, but to fulfill the word of Jesus which he spoke, signifying by what kind of death he was about to die."
So again,
Sorry about that.
no, you did fine. I forgot about this one thing, but that's okay. It mentions it here. What way was Jesus to die?
By Jewish law, he was supposed to be stoned, right?
Yeah, no, you jumping ahead of me again. Good point. That's exactly what I was going to say. But it was said he would be lifted up. He'd be on a tree. And Jesus said many times, "I would be crucified." He told them that they're gonna kill me, and they always forget this part. And 3 days later, I'll rise again. They always forgot that part, but they remembered that part. And so, in order to be crucified, the Jews did not crucify. Okay, they did not do that, and they stoned, like you said. So, and if they had went ahead and done it like they did to Stephen and to others, he would never have been crucified. Okay, which this is not what Jesus said would happen.
But in the Old Testament, it stated that none of his bones would be broken or
Right.
anything like that.
Right, exactly, and that was also part of the prophecy. Because if you were stoned, yes,
You'd be
We'd be
Rubble.
broken,
Yeah.
all broke
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
So, and it's interesting, when they came to him on the cross, he was already dead. So they didn't have to break his legs, because they had to break the legs of the other two because they were still a little bit alive. And once they break the legs, they can't breathe anymore, because you can't lift yourself up to breathe when you're in a situation. He'd already given up his spirit by that point. But anyway, so what are some things that stand out to you in these verses, besides what we just talked about?
Well, it says, and it was early.
By early, it probably means before daybreak. My guess is before sunrise.
I was gonna go back to even maybe about midnight.
It could have been, but
Or
probably
later.
sometime between midnight and 6 a.m.
Yeah,
Probably before the sun came up.
right.
And so we don't know the exact time. I think theologians have tried to nail it down as close as they can. I believe it's sometime before sunrise type of thing. Probably, I'm just guessing, let's say 4 a.m. maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows? Something, it's still dark, in other words, it's still dark. And so he woke up the Roman governor. Essentially, I don't know about you.
He was probably pretty pissed.
I don't know about you. I'm not good in the morning.
Yeah.
I like to ease into the morning, ease into the day. Have my breakfast. Listen to a little bit of news, and then deal with things. No, didn't happen for Pilate, did he? So he wouldn't be in a very good mood anyway. And so it's funny to see though is. Pilate asked them, "What accusation do you have against him?" And so basically, they reply to him, "Well, we wouldn't have brought him to you unless he was bad, so just condemn him and we'll be done." But he says, "If this man is not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him to you." So Pilate says, "Take him yourself." In other words, you take him, give him the lashes or whatever, and then you're done, And that's not what they wanted. They wanted their hands clean, because this is the Messiah they're killing, by the way. And I think some of them,
They knew.
some of them actually, I think, knew it. And
Yeah.
this comes up into an area that I don't want to even think about bringing up right now, because it's so full of fraught with things. But when the term the unforgivable sin is mentioned, it's talked about when the Pharisees knew this was Messiah in front of them. And instead, they said, you're doing it by the devil. And this was called the unforgivable sin. And I think these people are involved in this at this point. I think some of them knew this was Messiah and they wanted to get rid of him. He was a threat to them.
Yeah, they couldn't have him disobeying their laws.
Well, or upsetting their apple cart. And they were wealthy. These people were very wealthy. They made a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they didn't want things upset. But anyway, so Pilate, he's kind of he says, take him yourself, right? And because they didn't want to do that though, because they wanted Romans' hands on it, not theirs.
Because the Passover was coming up
Right.
and they didn't want to.
And that's part of it.
Yeah.
That's part of it as well.
You gotta get
I forgot to mention this. They wouldn't even come into the compound.
No.
This is almost hilarious, except it's not really hilarious. It's showing the depth of their hypocrisy. They wouldn't even come into the compound because they would what?
Be defiled.
Yet they're trying their best to kill this man on false premises,
Yeah.
false statements.
Trying to keep all their rules, and they're still going to railroad this guy anyway.
Think about that. Think about that. The hypocrisy here. And like I said, I believe some of them realized this was God in flesh in front of them, and yet they still wanted to do it. Still wanted to do it. Anyway, so.
Well, and Pilate was pissed by then. Take him yourselves.
Yeah.
Judge him by your own law. Why you
By relying on us.
Yes.
There was some interesting information in the lesson book. Let me see if I can find it here real quick.
You're like, do your own dirty deed.
Yes.
I think it was on page 94. Yeah. Okay. And it talks about Pilate a lot here. Gives some background information a little bit and talks about some of the things he did and why maybe he did them on page 94. And I'm going to read a few of the main points here. Again, Emperor Tiberius, he was the one who appointed Pilate. Pilate showed himself many times. This is not just accounts in scriptures. This is Roman accounts too. He proved himself to be an insecure, insensitive, and morally weak leader. He responded to perceived threats with excessive brutality. Luke 13:1 talks about one of them. His ruthlessness, there we go, eventually led to his being removed from office after 11 years of service. So basically, they declared Jesus to be a criminal, and that was supposed to be enough for Pilate. The Jews thought, right? And they made up though that not only did they claimed that Jesus disobeyed the law and committed blasphemy, but they made up the one of opposing taxation, which he really did not do. That's a made up thing.
Yeah.
And that he claimed to be Messiah, the King of the Jews. Now that title, King of the Jews, was an interesting thing. We see that later on Pilate put that on the cross as the accusation, and the Jews did not like that. They saw that because that's a public thing, a public record thing, and it says, the King of the Jews, Jesus, King of the Jews. It says, no, say that he thought he was king. No, what I've written, he said. And so they didn't like that at all, because it basically said the truth. It said, you've just killed the Messiah,
Well, and Pilate despised the Jews, and the Jews
yeah.
despised
Yeah,
Pilate.
yeah, it goes on to talk about that, doesn't it? There was tension between the Jewish rulers and Pilate, and the Jews resented the presence of the emperor's occupation forces, because he took a cut of all the things, and then they wanted more money for themselves probably. And Pilate also says despised the Jews. He did not. He thought he was in a really crummy place. He thought the emperor sent him there because he didn't like him. Okay. Nobody wanted to be in that part of the world apparently. Pilate initially refused to play the game. Right? The Jews thought that they had the power to order Jesus to be executed. The Jews presumed that, didn't they? They says, well, we wouldn't have brought him unless he's worthy of death.
Well, they were powerless.
Right. But Pilate, he felt certain of his decision, okay, and both of them were wrong. It says all the details of the death of Jesus had been orchestrated long before this mock trial. It is orchestrated by the Jews. They'd already figured out how they're going to do it and when they're going to do it. These verses, John 3:14, 8:28, and 12:32 talk a little bit about that. So that's kind of the background on Pilate. Pilate was not liked, and Pilate did not like being there, and Pilate did not like the Jews. So that's part of that interplay we see going on there. We see the hypocrisy and the contradiction of these verses where they wouldn't even go in there, be defiled. We want to participate in the Passover. So if we go there, we can't take the Passover. So we'll stay out here and call him to us. That way we won't be defiled, so we can go ahead and kill him. What? It's like they don't even see what they're doing. So the Jews were unwilling to even enter Pilate's residence because of the Passover. They were committed to keeping the law of purity on one hand, and they were more than willing, though, to send an innocent man off to be executed on the other hand. And they were happy to keep these rules as long as the rules fit their plans and schemes, it says. And we kind of talked about that already, obviously. So let's look at the next part here. By the way, anything stand out, that we didn't talk about that you wanted to ask or clarify?
I think I always wonder what became of Pilate.
It's not talked about here, but it was the other one. That's right. It was Pilate's wife instead. And one of the other accounts, I don't know if it's Luke talks about that maybe then, because Luke has a lot more detail about some of these things. It was probably Pilate's wife. And also, that was the particular account that talks about, and Caiaphas washed his hands publicly, saying, the blood is on you, Jews. And they said, yes, gladly, we'll take it. Just order him to be killed.
Sorry guys, I gotta go.
Okay.
See you later.
Bye.
Take care.
So, in these next 6 verses, did we read those already?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay, we're going to read the next one here, which is number 3, I think it is.
Yes.
Go ahead and read that one for me.
Okay. Therefore Pilate entered again into the praetorium and summoned Jesus and said to him, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus answered, are you saying this on your own initiative, or did others tell you about me? Pilate answered, I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and chief priests delivered you to me. What have you done? Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then my servants would be fighting so that I would not be handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not of this realm. Therefore Pilate said to him, so you are a king? Jesus answered, you say correctly that I am a king. For this I have been born, and for this I come into the world to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. Pilate said to him, what is truth?
A lot of stuff here, right? He asks a bunch of questions back and forth here, right? Pilate has a series of questions, and I think I wrote them down up here. And so, what did Jesus ask Pilate? he asked him a question in 34, right? What was that question?
Is this your own idea?
Yeah.
Did somebody else talk you into it?
Right, right. So he's trying to nail down with Pilate to think about this. Think about this. Is this your own initiative, or are you being manipulated by other people? Kind of a curious thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we see that Pilate asked a series of questions, didn't he? He asked all these up here. He basically asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Right? And then Jesus has said a few things, and so Pilate answers back, "Well, I'm not a Jew, am I?" And again, he asks, "What have you done?" And then he asks pointedly, "Are you a king then?" And then he asks the last one, "What is truth?" What is truth? So Pilate wanted to know these things, right? But he ascertained something important to Pilate. This guy was not a threat to him in a political or civil way. It was a religious thing. He realized these guys are just offering him up for envy because he's as religious as they are, only more, and they don't like
He's
that.
upsetting the apple cart.
Yeah. And so he doesn't see anything wrong with that, with him at this point. But he does ask him these questions anyway. And so he finds out these things. And Jesus does answer. He says, "You say correctly, I'm a king." Now he's talking about king in a spiritual sense here. And Pilate understands this at this point because he said something, if my kingdom were of this world, my servants would be fighting right now. They'd be stopping you. They'd be trying to stop you, right? And that's, he's using logic with Pilate here. He's saying, if I was king, if I was somebody who was going to be getting rid of you as governor, or even threatening the emperor, let's say, or something like that, you'd see fighting in the streets to protect me. Here I am, though, all by myself. Bound.
Yeah.
Been beaten already, right? She's already gone.
Thank you.
So obviously, at this point, Pilate knows he's not a threat. This person's not going to upset the Roman rule, and that's what he's concerned about. He's only concerned about this. And he also knows, Pilate knows also that this man is very popular. And you're right, I think it was Pilate's wife. So he also knows that his wife had said about this. He's got that in the back of his mind as well. You know, I'm going to let this guy go somehow, one way or the other. I don't see any real purpose to killing this man. And so that's what he's come to. So when he asks this last question, what is truth? This is kind of an interesting thing. Why do you think he asked that? What is truth? And what kind of truth was Jesus talking about?
Everyone on this side of truth listens to me, and he says, "What is truth?"
Uh-huh.
Well, truth, I've heard it described as word and deed becoming one.
Yeah.
It's kind of who determines that?
Yeah. The Bible commentary talks a little bit about this here, where Pilate said this thing, okay? Let's see if I can find it here. Pilate only understood a kingdom maintained by force of arms, with loyalty to Caesar. That's what Pilate was worried about, right? He pounced on the reference to Jesus' kingdom and asked again if he were king. At first, Jesus turned and answered back to them saying, "You say that I am a king," would be akin to the modern, "You said it." Scholars have noted the syntax of Pilate's question, although cloaked in incredulity, it suggested an expectation of an affirmative answer. So Jesus did not use this tactic to avoid the central issue. He acknowledged he was born to reign as a king. He went further to reiterate the kind of king he came to be. He came to testify to the truth. Now, the kings don't come to testify about the truth. Kings come to take over, right? And so he knew when this kind of an answer, that's what the purpose was. So obviously, Jesus' ultimate purpose was the salvation of humanity in that case, but we know that. But that involved revealing the truth about sinful people, a righteous God, the necessity of repentance, the primacy of faith, and salvation through his sacrificial atonement. So not everyone was able to accept this statement. Only those who were on the side of truth would listen to his voice. You know, the people of the world don't understand it, right? They won't listen to it. They can't comprehend it. People who have been saved, they understand it. It's been revealed to them, right? The Holy Spirit reveals it to us. We understand more of that than because we have the ability to do so. So by truth, Jesus didn't mean a philosophical concept or empirical fact, but the truth of himself. for he is truth. And John 14:6 talks about that. Truth finds its source in God's revelation. And what was God's main revelation? Messiah, right?
Yeah.
Sending Jesus, right? Not human determination. The idea of hearing his voice went beyond physical listening to the receiving truth in the heart. Many refuse to embrace Jesus, but multitudes through the centuries have been embraced by God's truth in Christ and have been saved. Truth finds its source in God's revelation, not human determination. So one might wonder about the tone of Pilate's voice, because we don't know, right? We only have the words. It says, what is truth? His experience with the political and religious intrigues in Rome and in Jerusalem had hardened him to assertions of truth. He may have considered philosophical aspects in this question. And that's very true, because Greek influences were very heavy in Rome as well. And that had a lot to do with finding truth, the Greek thoughts and things like that. But more likely, it says, his question expressed a cynical bewilderment. Because remember, he was concerned only about one thing, maintaining Roman power. Steve, can you close that door for me? Thank you very much. Some writers think that he was merely being dismissive of the question altogether. Well, what is truth? Truth is truth, Could have been that as well. Christians can confidently proclaim that Jesus bore no guilt. None of his accusers could get their story straight. Even though the pagans prefect, in other words, Pilate found no basis for their charges. Christ faced the cross not for anything he did, but for everything that he would do as Messiah, right? He would be that sacrifice, in other words. That's why he faced it. Only a sinless Savior could die in our place. And I think that's a pretty good explanation of maybe what he was getting at, because it is kind of not really addressed. And he may have been just saying, well, okay, I don't see anything wrong. You're fine. What is truth anyway? Okay, let's see if we can get him out of here. I think that's what Pilate was at that point. That seems to be that way. Let's look at the last part here. We're running a little bit of time at 5 more minutes. Will we make it? I don't know. The trade is called the trade. It says, well, he questioned the truth. His very definition of truth was standing right in front of him, and that's exactly right. So let's look at the last one. For our last 3 verses, I want you to listen to how each person involved reacted to the situation. Who has number 4?
I got it.
All right.
And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, I find no guilt in him. But you have a custom that I release someone for you at the Passover. Do you wish then that I released for you the king of the Jews? So they cried out again, saying, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber.
Okay, Barabbas, it says in another area too, was an insurrectionist. He was a murderer as well. He was a bad dude. Okay, when you look up bad dude back then in the dictionary, you'd find Barabbas' face there. You go to the post office in Jerusalem, you'd see the most wanted. Barabbas would have been up there. He was bad, and they caught him. Okay, so they were going to take care of him. There's no doubt about his guilt. He was going to go down. And so no one liked Barabbas, Pilate thought. This guy has robbed the Jewish people. He's probably killed Jewish people as well as Roman people. All these different things. So we got him. We're going to take care of him. So let's see. I don't want to kill Jesus. Ooh, there's this custom. I know. I can release one prisoner during the Passover. We don't know where this custom came from, by the way. It's kind of a tradition custom that came up. Kind of like, where does the custom of Santa Claus come from type of thing. Some people think it's this, some people think it's that, right? Well, I'm not really equating that, but this was what he was dealing with. He was using it to his advantage. Pilate did not want to get his hands dirty on this either. And so he was trying everything he could. So I know, I'll give him a choice. Barabbas or release Jesus. There's your choice. And I know that people really like Jesus. I've heard good things about him, and they really hate Barabbas. So that'll fix it. But did it? No, it did not. So they cried out again, saying, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber. He was a bad person. And there's no doubt about it, he deserved this death. Now another gospel account, it talks about this. And apparently a certain amount of people were allowed to come into this compound. And the Jewish people were making sure the right people got in. So when this came up, they all shouted, the crowd shouted, we want Barabbas released. Crucify Jesus. And the other account basically says the high priest had incited the crowd.
Oh, yeah.
So the crowd was primed, it was the right group, and they had the right ringleader there to egg them on. So what was Pilate hearing? He was only hearing the one side.
Yeah.
So it was a kangaroo court in the best definition of the word. The fix was in, they wanted him dead, and they got the people in there to demand it. So when this, they must have anticipated this, that's the only thing I can figure. And they made sure their people were in there to call for Jesus to be the one who had no guilt, the one who was innocent, to be the one who died, instead of the one who was very guilty, Barabbas. Kind of an interesting thing to see that as well, I thought.
And his name Barabbas is interesting too, because Barabbas, you take it apart, that's son of the father.
Uh-huh.
His name means. So you got the son of man, you got the son of the father.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of Jewish names had that kind of religious connection of one sort or another, so yeah, definitely. And by the way, there was other insurrectionists, and one of them was actually Bar Jesus or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so he wanted to let him go. He really tried to do it, right? But basically his hands had been tied essentially, and this was going to happen this way, just like Jesus said. Go figure. Just like Jesus said would happen is going to happen. So even though the Romans and the Jews miscarried the justice concerning in Jesus' case, who was still in control of the situation?
Jesus.
Jesus was still in control. That's right. He knew that everything he was experiencing and everything he would be facing was all part of the Father's bigger plan of redemption for you, me, you folks out there. That was all part of that plan. And it's an exciting thing to think of. Let me see. There's some more information about Barabbas too. I think it's on page 6 in the book. It's really short blurb on that. I think, if I remember right. It's called Wordwise. There it is. First one, Barabbas. It says, a murderer and insurrectionist held in Roman custody at the time of Jesus' trial. When given the choice by Pilate, the Jewish crowd demanded the release of Barabbas rather than Jesus. Well, we know that already. So, essentially, we covered that already. But if you were Barabbas, how would you feel? I've always often wondered that. That would be an interesting situation to just suppose you were Barabbas. You knew you were going to die that day.
Some kind of guilt.
Yeah, you're guilty of some nasty things, and then you got this guy.
And then you're totally released. You're totally absolved. Wow. Now, that's kind of a picture of what salvation is. Isn't it? In a way. He experienced it in a different manner, I understand. I'm not saying he was saved, but he was guilty. He should have died for his sins, and he still was given a second chance, right? In the same way, we should die for our sins, and Jesus saves us for all eternity. Kind of an interesting thing to see there as well. All right, so let's wind this up. So, like the authorities, some people reject Jesus because of the facts. Regardless of the facts. I said that wrong. Like the authorities, some people reject Jesus regardless of what the facts are. Acknowledging that he is the Son of God requires them to recognize their own sin and their own need for a Savior. Did you think the Jewish leaders wanted to do that, first of all? No, they didn't think they had any sin. We were sinless. We didn't go to that compound. We're fine. We're great. Yeah, we know we've been plotting to kill this innocent man for a long time now. But other than that, we're fine. This is what serves as a comfort to those who follow Jesus becomes a stumbling block to those who reject him. And that's exactly right. Now, a little point on the Jewish things. The Jewish people thought, as long as I don't actually do an act, I'm not guilty of it. I can think about it, I can plot about it, I can maybe suggest it, but I didn't actually do it. So my hands are clean. That's what their philosophy was. So that's why they got Rome to do their dirty work.
Yeah.
Any comments or questions on that? The trade. Barabbas was doomed, and now he was free.
You wonder what became of Barabbas.
Yeah. My guess he did some more crimes.
Probably.
But maybe not. We don't know. Maybe he just turned his life around too.
Could be.
There's a lot of people who've done things like that who were terrible in life, and then they turned around and they became a different person. So Jesus was without guilt and sinless in every way. That's our main point. So remember that. The three parts of the lesson I want to talk about is Christians should expect false accusations to be made against them. Did he deserve any of those accusations, Jesus?
No.
He didn't deserve it. Guess what, folks? We're going to be accused at times too. We're going to be made fun of. People are going to make things up about us. That's
Yep.
going to happen.
Yep.
Second point, Christians can confidently proclaim Jesus is without guilt. We see that. We know that. And the third point is, some people reject Jesus regardless of what they see right in front of them. Pilate saw right in front of him this guy. He heard all the wonderful things this guy had done.
Yeah.
And yet, he still allowed him to be crucified. So looking back at today's passages, how did Jesus communicate with Pilate? Well, he talked with him, right? He talked with him. He tried to stimulate him into thinking, realizing who he was, right? And Jesus did the best he could that way, you might say. But Pilate was only thinking one thing. What Rome wants, I don't want to be in trouble here. Okay, go ahead and crucify him.
Well, Jesus wasn't going to strong arm him into believing,
Yeah.
you know.
And it was all part of the plan anyway, that he was going to be killed. So the challenge of our study is to be prepared for people who sometimes misinterpret facts about Jesus. Or we're going to run across that all the time. Well, he was just a good man. But, he wasn't sinless, right? Or they'll make up something else about Jesus. There's many other teachers besides Jesus that are probably just as good or better. Different things like that. Anything they can to dilute who Jesus really is. And that we see the Jews did that, and we see that Pilate fell in line with all that stuff. Any comments? Any questions before we close? I'm about 3 minutes over time. 4 minutes.
Okay, well, you
Terrible.
did it.
No, actually, wait a minute. Only 2.5. I'm good. Let's have a word of prayer and be dismissed. Heavenly Father, thank you for this enlightening time we've had of study to see these things that Jesus had to endure for us, Lord. Lord, just thank you for that endurance, for that willingness he had to endure those trials, and the cruelty, Lord, of being beaten, of being made fun of and spat upon, and all these different things, and then to be nailed on that cross, Lord, just for us. Even while we were yet sinners, Jesus died for us, it says. Thank you so much for all you've done for us, Lord, and pray that we'd have a great rest of the week in your Son's name. Amen. So,
I did a little historical.
thank you for being with us today. I'm going to close this up here on the line here.
Violently
And
put down
just
his
pray you stand by on this YouTube channel for
Revolution or something.
our assistant pastor Derek. He'll be preaching soon. And be in prayer for our pastor Matthew while he's away from us. He's traveling back today, I think. Thank you for being with us. God bless you all, and we'll see you later.
His boss sent him back to Rome to see the emperor to explain his actions in this whole thing. On the way there, the emperor